Story 1. The Father's Day Imposter. To everyone listening at the Haunted Confession. I'm Ramirez from Valencia, Rio de Janeiro, and this happened a few years ago on Father's Day. I've been separated from my son's mother for a long time, but we always kept a good relationship for his sake. We never had issues organizing holidays, birthdays, or vacations. As his dad, it naturally was my turn to spend Father's Day with him. We agreed I would pick him up at noon from the sports complex where he had his weekend soccer practice. It was a normal routine. None of us could have imagined that this day would become the most bizarre experience of our lives. That morning, some issues came up at work, and I ended up leaving a bit later than planned. Between one thing and another, I arrived at his school around 1 p.m. I walked in, went straight to the front desk, and asked for my son. The receptionist looked at me, and her answer left me completely confused. She told me he had left a long time ago with his father. I thought maybe she misunderstood, so I politely explained that I had just arrived to pick him up. She gave me a weird look and said the boy had left over an hour ago with his father. I remember the exact feeling that hit me in that moment. My stomach dropped in dread, and my heart started pounding against my ribs. I pulled out my ID, showed it to her, and stated clearly that I was his father. The receptionist's expression instantly changed. She looked nervous. She swore to me that she saw my son walk out with a grown man, and that she had even heard the boy call him Dad. For a few seconds, neither of us knew what to say. She insisted that she was absolutely sure of what she saw, and I knew for a fact that it was impossible because I had just gotten there. The first thing I did was call my ex-wife. I thought maybe there had been a last-minute change of plans that I wasn't told about, but she had no idea what was going on either. From that moment on, everything spiraled into a desperate search. We scoured the nearby streets, asked shop owners, called family and friends, but no one had seen him. Finally, we filed a police report, and they started investigating. They checked security cameras in the area and actually found some footage. The problem was the quality. It was terrible. In several clips, you could clearly see my son walking next to an adult man who looked exactly like me, but it was impossible to make out the man's face. The only obvious thing was how naturally they were acting. They behaved like they knew each other perfectly. Since some of the officers already knew our family, they mobilized quickly. They searched parks, squares, and public spaces nearby, while we tried our best not to lose our minds. Just as the sun was setting, we got a call. My son had been found in a park miles away from where he was supposed to be. When I arrived at the scene, I saw him sitting on a bench. He was calm. He wasn't crying. He didn't look scared, and he wasn't confused. As soon as he saw me, he ran over and hugged me like everything was completely normal. The first thing he asked was why I had left. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought the shock of the situation was making him confused. But what came next was even more unsettling. My son told me that I had picked him up from school. He said we spent most of the afternoon walking around together, bought food from a street vendor, and talked about soccer for hours. He even remembered specific comments about players and teams that I had supposedly made. As he spoke, he sounded completely convinced of every single word. There wasn't a trace of doubt in his voice. To him, those memories were entirely real. I tried to explain that I had spent the whole afternoon looking for him. I told him I never made it to the school on time, but he thought I was joking or messing with him. The more we talked, the more details he remembered. He described entire conversations, places we walked, and situations that simply never happened. The craziest part, some of those conversations sounded exactly like things I would actually say. The paramedics examined him to make sure he was okay, and thankfully, they found nothing wrong. The police kept investigating for days. The leading theory was that someone had impersonated me. However, they never managed to identify the man in the footage. They found zero concrete evidence to explain what actually happened during those missing hours. That night, we ended up having dinner together. After all, it was still Father's Day. I remember watching my son eat, unable to stop asking myself where he had really been all afternoon. Over the years, this topic has come up many times at family gatherings. My son never changed his version of the story. He always maintained that he spent that Father's Day with me. Today, he is a grown man, and whenever we talk about that day, the exact same thing happens. He stands by his story, and I stand by the fact that I never picked him up. The weirdest part is that after all these years, neither of us believes the other is lying. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of it all.
Story 2. The Girl in the Pepper Tree. I'm sharing this to support the haunted confession. This is something that has been happening in my family since before I was even born. I don't know if it's paranormal or not, but no one has ever been able to find a logical explanation. Honestly, it would be absurd not to think it's paranormal, but I'll let you draw your own conclusions. I'm 16 years old, and I live with my parents and my little brother in a house that's been in our family for generations. It used to belong to my maternal grandparents. This is where my 7 aunts and uncles grew up alongside my mom, and when my grandparents passed away, the house was left to her. The property is unusually large for a house in the middle of the city. Back in the day, there were chickens, a small pen, and several fruit trees that have since dried up. The only tree that remains exactly as it always was is a massive, ancient weeping pepper tree sitting way back in the garden. For as long as I can remember, I've heard stories about this tree, and strangely, they weren't told to scare us. Whenever it was brought up, the adults talked about it like they were reminiscing about a childhood prank. With a slightly lower pitch, mysterious tone, they said a little girl would appear in the branches. Short pause. The weird part wasn't just the ghost itself, but how it happened. According to my aunts and uncles, at any given phase of their childhood, only one of them could see her. Just one. For example, when my mom could see her, none of her siblings could. After a few months, the girl would stop appearing to my mom, and shortly after, one of the other 6 siblings would casually mention that the girl was back in the tree. There were never 2 people seeing her at the same time. At least on that detail, they all agreed to this day. One would say she was sitting on a branch. Another swore she was hiding behind the trunk. Someone else claimed she walked barefoot along the highest branches. But always, only one child could see her. The others could stand in the yard until dawn and see absolutely nothing. My grandfather used to get annoyed, convinced they were just copying each other's made-up stories. But over the years, he eventually accepted that none of them were lying. My grandmother reacted differently. She would simply ask, "Are you still seeing her?" And when they said yes, her only advice was to never speak to the girl. She never explained why. For a long time, I thought this was just a family myth, until it was my turn. I must have been around 7. I was playing alone in the backyard when I saw a little girl sitting among the branches of the old tree. To be completely honest, I wasn't scared. I just assumed she was a neighbor's daughter. She was wearing a very light-colored dress. Her hair fell just below her shoulders, and her legs were swinging slowly off the branch. I waved at her, and she looked down at me. I remember this moment perfectly because she gave me a faint smile. I yelled for her to come down and play, but she didn't answer. She just stayed exactly where she was. I ran inside to tell my mom. She stopped washing the dishes and asked me something I didn't quite understand at the time. "Were you the one seeing her?" I said yes. My mom walked outside with me, stared at the tree for a few seconds, then quietly took my hand and led me back inside. She didn't ask what the girl looked like. That same afternoon, I overheard my mom on the phone with one of my uncles. The first thing she said was, "It's my daughter's turn." Short pause. For several months, I continued seeing her. Sometimes she just sat there. Other times she seemed to pace along the thicker branches. I never saw her climb down, and she never came closer to the house. Even though I tried talking to her many times, I never heard her voice. All she did was watch me. And then, after a while, she just stopped appearing. I grew up thinking the cycle was finally over. Speak with wise intention. I never saw her climb down, and she never came closer to the house. Even though I tried talking to her many times, I never heard her voice. All she did was watch me. And then, after a while, she just stopped appearing. I grew up thinking the cycle was finally over. Speak with wise intention. My little brother is 7 years old now. A few weeks ago, we were eating lunch when out of nowhere he asked, "Is the girl from the tree going to eat too?" The entire table went dead silent. My mom looked up first, trying to hide her expression, asking calmly, "What girl?" He answered like it was the most normal thing in the world, "The one playing up in the pepper tree." Nobody said another word. Since then, my brother talks about her the exact same way we all did. But a few days ago, his story started changing. He said the girl wasn't playing anymore. Now she just spends all her time standing perfectly still. Warm pause. Speak with a hint of dread. Until 3 nights ago, we were eating dinner when he stared out the window into the pitch-black yard and said, "Tonight, she's hanging." My dad cautiously asked what he meant, and my brother replied with absolute innocence, "She's hanging by her back, like someone tied her up from behind." Speak with love, concluding with an eerie tone. My mom immediately told him to stop talking about it. But there's something else. For the past few days, always in the dead of night, we've started hearing a creaking sound coming from the backyard. It's a slow, rhythmic groan, like a heavy rope stretching and slacking in the wind. Whisper the final line. The thing is, there has never been a swing on that tree, and I've never had the courage to walk out into the dark and see exactly where that sound is coming from.
Hey everyone, at the Haunted Confession. I hope you read this until the end, because I swear on my life, this actually happened to me. My name is Valerio. This took place when I was a young guy, working at my aunt's diner and pastry shop. One night, a massive order came in. Normally, I would have taken the motorcycle, but it was busted, so I grabbed the bike. It took me about 25 minutes to get there. I handed over the food, the customer paid, and handed me a solid tip. That put me in a great mood. On my way back, with an empty bag and cash in my pocket, I decided to take the shortcut down the ravine. The dirt road cutting through the ravine technically had streetlights, but they were garbage. The city had tried to pave it once, but rain washed it away. Right next to the ravine was a massive empty lot. It was the old fairgrounds. But that night, it was dead empty. Just a giant pitch-black void beside the road. I was about halfway down when I heard a groan. It was faint, like someone trying to call for help. I hit the brakes immediately. The groan happened again, this time clearer. It was coming from the side of the dirt path. That's when I saw a figure sprawled on the ground. The flickering streetlight only illuminated part of her body, but I could tell it was an old woman. I dropped my bike and rushed over. She was lying on her side, clothes caked in dirt. She let out another rattling moan and spoke in a terribly weak voice, saying her back was in agonizing pain. I told her I was going to help her up. I slid my arm under her shoulder, but she was incredibly heavy. It felt like her body was physically rooted to the earth. And in that moment, I heard something snap underneath her. It was a sharp, dry crack, like a thick tree branch snapping in half. But the sound came from inside her.
The old woman let out a horrifying screech. It was a guttural, raspy sound that made my teeth grind together. Her face was inches from my neck. Her breath hit my bare skin. It was a sour, rotting stench. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to back away. But I braced myself to pull her up one last time. That's when she grabbed me. Her fingers dug into my back with impossible, crushing strength. She embraced me in a way that felt entirely unnatural. She started making this wet, sickening sound with her mouth, like she was chewing on something. I planted my feet and used every ounce of strength I had to lift her away from me. But she clung tighter. I felt her jaw unhinge against my neck. And then she bit down. The pain was sharp and instant. I shoved her forward with everything I had. She collapsed into the dirt. I grabbed my neck and stumbled backward. And that's when the flickering yellow light fully illuminated her face. I swear to God, she didn't look human anymore. Her mouth was gaping open. Her eyes were completely white, clouded over, dead, yet glaring at me with monstrous intent. I took a step back, but I misjudged the edge. I tumbled backward down the steep side of the ravine. Above me, the woman didn't just stand up. She sprang to her feet and launched herself off the ledge, diving directly at me. We crashed and rolled down the embankment together. She was glued to me, making that unnatural rattling groan. We slammed into the flat ground at the bottom. She stood up before I could. The way she moved, it was horrifying. Like she had no joints. She lunged again, fighting for my life. I jammed my hands against her chest, kicked up with my legs, and shoved her off me. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran toward the city lights and never looked back. I finally hit the paved street and kept running until I found an open bar. I stumbled toward the men outside, trembling so violently I could barely form words. When they walked back with flashlights, the road was empty. No footprints, no injured woman. But back at the bar, one of the guys shined his light on my neck. She hadn't ripped the flesh, but there was a deep, purplish bite mark forming, clear as day. Over the years, I heard rumors from the old-timers about that empty lot. They said long before the city expanded, it used to be an unmarked burial ground. I don't know how much of that is true. All I know is what grabbed me in the dark that night.
When I was in my early 20s, about 6 years ago, I moved to a very remote area, renting a small cabin surrounded by absolutely nothing but dense forest. The first 3 months were peaceful, but after those 3 months, over the course of just a single week, something shifted. A terrible, heavy sensation began to grow inside me. The best way to describe it was a deep, suffocating sense of dread. It hit me every single time I stepped out of the cabin and looked into the woods. After a week of living like a prisoner in my own home, I made an incredibly stupid decision. I forced myself to walk into the forest. My logic was that if I faced the fear head on, the dread would finally go away. I stepped off the porch and crossed the tree line. Almost instantly, the panic spiked. The forest felt utterly dead. There was no wind, no rustling leaves, no birds. Everything was drowned in an absolute, crushing silence. But I kept going. I walked until the cabin was completely out of sight. That's when the atmosphere shattered. My heart started hammering against my ribs. A woman, walking straight toward me, calling out. She looked completely normal. She walked right up to me, smiled, and introduced herself as Lynn. She kept smiling. She said she was just enjoying a walk through the woods and asked if I wanted to join her. The way she spoke, it was exaggeratedly friendly, almost seductively cheerful.
I apologized and said I was heading right back home, but I couldn't stop myself from asking where exactly she came from. She casually looked over her shoulder and said she lived around the area. Her grin never faded. My gut screamed that I could not trust this person. I realized how dangerously bizarre this entire interaction was. I shook my head, firmly declined, and took a step back. She kept that exact same cheerful, friendly smile, and with the exact same pleasant tone, she delivered her final sentence. "You shouldn't be here." It took a second for the words to register. When I snapped my head back to ask her what the hell she meant, she was already walking away. I froze. I watched her back as she disappeared into the thick brush, and as she vanished from sight, the overwhelming dread that had been choking me for a week began to lift. The silence was still there, but it was just regular forest silence. I looked around one last time and practically sprinted back to the cabin. The second I locked the door, my mind was made up. I was leaving. I didn't own much, so I started hauling everything into the back of my truck. Still, it took me until just after sunset to finish packing. I zipped up the final duffel bag in the living room, and right at that exact moment, the feeling came back. It slammed into me harder than ever. Pure, eschatological terror. I slowly walked over to the front window and peered out into the dusk. Standing right at the edge of the tree line, perfectly still and swallowed by the shadows, was the woman. She was just standing there in the dark, staring dead at my cabin. I grabbed my last bag, burst out the front door, threw it into the truck bed, and slammed my foot on the gas. I didn't feel a drop of relief until my tires hit the paved highway, miles away from that place. I have no answers. I only know one thing for sure. Whatever was happening out there in the dark, I want absolutely no part of it.